Hello there and welcome back to the channel. I was recently approached by a company called Astroasis to ask if I was interested in reviewing their Oasis Focuser Rose product. Now I must admit I hadn't heard of this product before, so I took a look on their website to find out what it was. It's essentially their version of probably the most common electronic autofocuser on the market, the ZWO EAF. But it does have some interesting differences. Firstly, it's a cylindrical assembly, and secondly, it connects using gears to the focus knob or focus drive shaft rather than using one of those couplers with grub screws on it. And thirdly, because of the way it connects, it is able to have a disengage option where you disengage the gearing from the focus shaft so that you can turn the focus shaft manually without having to disassemble the electronic autofocuser. And that is of interest to me, mainly because I've got a Celestron EdgeHD telescope which has multiple different configurations, and depending on which one of those configurations I'm going to be using, I need to make a bulk change to the position of the focus knob. Maybe I need to do 12 turns to the right or 7 turns to the left, and that's a bit fiddly. When you're using a ZWO EAF, you have to undo a grub screw at one end of the coupling and then turn the coupling and then tighten the grub screw up again, and it can be very difficult then to know where the flat is on the drive shaft on the EAF. So I'm interested in this for that reason. So I said yes to them and they've sent one to me and it's arrived. So we're going to have a quick look and see what's in the box, and then I'm going to have a go at fitting it to my EdgeHD 11, and I'm also going to have a go at fitting it to my Newtonian telescope, which is a Skywatcher Quattro 8 CF, which is an 8-inch Newtonian. So let's get started. So this is what arrived from Astroasis. This is the main box, and then there's a small separate box that they sent me as well, which I believe is the adapter for the Celestron EdgeHD. There's an information card telling about the different items, and then there is a veritable treasure trove of little boxes. I really like the way this is packaged actually. I can't see any plastic at all. It is all cardboard, so that's really good from an environmental point of view. So we have no less than 12 cardboard boxes to open. Now I've always wanted to do this, so by the magic of YouTube. So there we go. There are actually no less than about 40 separate items in these boxes, which is quite amazing. That does include all the screws and grub screws and washers. And of course I did request adapters for multiple telescopes. So I expected a fair few items, but I don't think I was quite expecting this many. The build quality on all of them appears to be very good indeed. Some of these things I'm definite what they are. So here's the main event. This is the Oasis Focuser Rose. It's got the gear here that engages with one of these gears that you attach to the shaft of your focuser. It's got a 12 volt, a 5.5 by 2.1 DC jack socket here, a USB type C socket, and a jack socket for the temperature probe. You can see that when you twist the body here, there's an on-off indicator here. When you twist the body, the gear rotates inside the body and engages or disengages with the mating gear on the focuser shaft. So that's that clutch that I was telling you about. We've got the temperature probe, a USB type C cable. These are a number of different gears and couplings. We've got 2 different sizes of clamps. We've got a gear locator, which I believe is just used to help you fit things correctly. It's not actually part of the final assembly. We've got some hex keys or Allen keys. We've got this adapter, which looks very much as though it's intended to mount on the back of a Celestron EdgeHD telescope, but I've yet to confirm that that's the case. And there's another type of adapter here, which perhaps is for the more sort of Crayford style focusers, but we'll see. I need to figure that out. But an impressive set of bits of kit. They all look very nicely made, as I say, So what I'm going to do is set to work trying to fit this to the dual speed Crayford focuser on my Skywatcher Quattro 8CF Newtonian telescope. Okay, so here's my Skywatcher Quattro 8CF. You can see the dual speed Crayford focuser. You've got the coarse and the fine on this end, and the coarse only on this end, and it's always the coarse only end that you have to fit to. So the first job is to take this focus knob off and just rotate it to line up the grub screw with the hole on the top there, and then pop the Allen key in, loosen the grub screw and take that off. So the next thing to do is to take a little gear here and to put a grub screw into it. So I'm going to take the little grub screw and just pop the thinner of the 3 Allen keys into the grub screw there, and then screw that into the gear. Not too far, I don't want it to protrude on the inside. That's fine, and that gear is going to go onto the end of this shaft here, but not yet. So the next thing we do is, this is the clamp bracket, it's the 28mm clamp bracket, and that will go onto the end of the Focuser Rose. But first we screw it to this, which is the gear locator. So we're going to screw these two together like this. So take the 3 screws that are used to fix the clamp to the Focuser Rose. We'll just put them in loosely first to get them all aligned. And I'll just nip them up. They don't need to be super tight because we're going to be taking this off again in a moment. Okay, so now that I've got that assembled, what I'm now going to do is to figure out how this is going to fit onto here. And what I need to do is be careful that nothing fouls on this big cylindrical barrel here. So there's only certain angles where that's possible, which is about here. And so that's how I'm going to fit things. So this needs to be fully engaged on here, and then the gear needs to be just touching the underside of the gear locator. So if I put the gear on the end of the shaft just very loosely, and now bring the gear locator into position, slide it on until it is fully engaged, which is there, making sure that the gear is as far out that way as possible. And now I can take that, actually I'll take the Allen key, I'll just rotate the gear till I can see the grub screw, and I can now tighten up the grub screw, making sure the gear stays in contact with the gear locator. Okay, just checking one more time. Now I can take that off and just make sure that that is properly tightened up. Now there's no flat on the shaft on this particular focuser, but if yours has a flat on it, you need to make sure that the grub screw is lined up with the flat. So now that that's done, I can now take the gear locator off here, off of the clamp. So just undo these 3 screws. Like so, take the clamp off, and now bring in the Focuser Rose and pop that on in place there. Doing up the screws again. Now this time this is the permanent assembly, so this time I am going to make sure that these are done up nice and tightly. So I'm just nipping those up good and tight. Okay, now I'm going to make sure that the Focuser Rose is in the off position. There's on and there's off. And now I can bring this into position. No worry about the cog fouling because it's in the off position. Make sure it's fully pushed on there, and now with the larger of the 3 hex keys I can do up the clamp nice and tight, and that's it, we are on. So because we're in the off position, we should still be able to move the focuser, and we can, and when we turn it into the on position, which is there, this no longer moves. So that's now ready to test. So next thing I'm going to do is connect up some power and try the Bluetooth control from the app on my phone. So I've gone into the App Store and typed Oasis Mate. I'm going to download the Oasis Mate app, and once that download is finished, I can open the app. I can allow it to see Bluetooth devices. I don't need an account, so I'm going to hit offline login, and I now need to add a device. I need to add an Oasis Focuser. The Focuser is already powered and Bluetooth's enabled on my phone, so we can scan for the device. So this takes it about 20 seconds to find the device. Should be almost done. There we go. And we can now connect to the device, and we're finished. So we're all connected now. We can choose the connected focuser, and we're in. So the board is at 27 degrees, the maximum position is 80,000, we're connected, the current position is 47,000, we've got a set zero feature, we've got a fine and a coarse relative control. The coarse is set to 3000. If I press out, you'll see it actually moves in by 3000 each time I press it. So I need to go to advanced and change the reverse direction. Switch, so now out means out and in means in, so that's now working correctly. I have noticed that when you change direction, it just moves a little bit in the wrong direction first and then moves inwards. I will mention that to Astroasis, I don't know why that's happening. Okay, but basically everything seems to be working nicely. We also have an absolute control, so we can type in a position we want to go to, such as 40,000, and press go to, and it will move us to that position. So let's try a different position. Let's try 50,000. Oh, I've put in 500,000. So I need to stop that. So I'll come out and press stop and take one of the zeros off and press go to, and it should now go to 50,000. And let's try 30,000. It looks like it's retracted all the way in now, so I probably need to hit a set zero to really set this up correctly so that zero is all the way in. But I'm only just doing this to test that it basically is working. And there we go, we're just going out to 60,000 now. There we go. So the next thing I want to do, I'm going to take it off this telescope and I'm going to fit it to my Celestron EdgeHD 11. And once I've done that, I'm actually going to load the ASCOM drivers from the Astroasis website so that I can control this from within Nina and try an autofocus in anger on the EdgeHD 11. Okay, so I've put my EdgeHD 11 on the mount because that's the most convenient way to work on it. It allows me to rotate it into a horizontal position so that it's easier to work with. So I'll just pop the dew shield off there. And now I can rotate it into horizontal position. And now I'm ready to work on the focuser knob. So the first step is to pull off the rubber cover on the focusing knob. There we go. Next step is to remove the 3 screws on the orange retaining plate. we go. And we'll need to retain the 3 screws because we're going to need those for putting it back together. So this is the SCT adapter, and that's going to go on to here and be screwed on in place of the orange plate. There's a lower plate on this which I'll need to remove and attach here first, and then attach the rest of this assembly to that lower plate. So the next step is to just undo the 3 screws on here to separate this bottom plate from the rest of this assembly. Okay, I've removed that plate, here it is. So I can now fit that over here, and it fits beautifully in the same position as before. And I'm going to use the 3 bolts from the original orange plate to fit that to the back of the SCT. Okay, I've engaged the 3 screws now, so I'm just going to nip those up. Just making sure they're not too tight. Yeah, that focus knob is still able to turn freely, which is important. So I can nip them up a little more. That's still free to move. So the next step is to refit this assembly. However, I have noticed that the red part inside here is ever so slightly different to this separate one that's been sent to me. If you look inside them, this one has 21.8 written inside it, and this one has 22 written inside it. And checking whether they go over the knob or not, this one sticks, whereas this one goes fully on. So I believe it's the 22mm one that I need. So I need to swap over the gear, this bearing, and this bearing onto this alternative red part, and I'm also going to put 2 of the grub screws supplied into this as well. So I've put the bearing on the top and inside. I now need to put the little gear on the top, making sure that the grub screw on the gear lines up with the flat, like so, and I can now do up the little grub screw. Making sure that's nice and tight. Okay, so this can now go onto the focus knob like so. So now that's on, I can fit the rest of the housing, being careful to make sure that this raised portion is towards the outside to minimise any chance of interference with the outside edge of the reducer should I fit that. So being careful not to drop the screws, just going to bring that in like so, line up the screws with those holes there. Just get a couple of turns on each one so that they're all engaged, and now I can nip them up. Okay, great, so we should now be in a position where the black part is firmly attached to the telescope, and the red part is still free to turn. Now at the moment I've not done up the grub screws that hold the red part to the focus knob, so that's the next step, is to do up those grub screws. And there's no flats on the focus knob, so there's nothing to align with here, so I'm just going to nip that up. That's that one, and we'll do the other one as well. Okay, so that's now got a firm hold on the focus knob, and I can feel that I'm turning the focus knob. There's a little bit of extra resistance there as I turn that. And just a different view for you here so you can see more clearly. Here I'm turning the focus knob using the red portion, and the Oasis Focuser Rose is going to drive this cog like so. So next step is to fit the Focuser Rose onto here. So to attach the Focuser Rose to here, we're going to need to use one of the clamps. So I'm just checking which of the clamps is going to fit. I believe it's this one, the 33mm. So we'll just check that. Yeah, that fits on nicely. Okay, so I've now got to attach the 33mm 6mm clamp onto the end of the Focuser Rose. Okay, so just doing up those 3 screws. And I'll just nip those up so that they're good and tight. Okay, so we're now in a position to fit the Focuser Rose onto here. I'm going to make sure, of course, that it's in the off position, which it is, so that the gear inside here and this gear don't foul initially. So all I need to do is put this on here. Actually, one more step, and that is I need to put a screw in here on the clamp so that I can do it up. Okay, so I've popped the screw in there so I can tighten up the clamp, and now I can fit the Focuser Rose over the top and do up the clamp, being careful to make sure that this part of the clamp is outermost. I might as well just reduce any protrusions on the inside. So I'm just doing up the clamp now, and I'll nip that up nice and tight so it can't move. And it feels really solid, it's not going anywhere. This is a really nice assembly. I really like it. I actually like it more than the way that you attach the ZWO EAF, and I'm already thinking, since Astroasis have allowed me to keep this unit, that I'm going to use this permanently on my EdgeHD 11. And I don't think I would have said that had it not been for this clutch, but I can now turn that focus knob by hand like this myself to get close to the right focus for the particular configuration that I'm using, and then simply engage the gear. Now that doesn't move, and now it's driven by the Focuser Rose. It's a really well thought out design, and although I teased a little about all the different fixings and items that came with it, they've given me everything I need, and you can ask no more than that. So next thing to do is I'm going to connect up the DC power and the USB cable to my PC and install the ASCOM drivers so that I can operate this from within Nina. Okay, so this is the home page of the Astroasis website, www.astroasis.com. You see that it's all in English here, and we can either click on Product Oasis Focuser, or if you want to go to the first of these screens, then you can click here as well. But I'll go Product Oasis Focuser, and on this page we see a number of different focuser elements. We're interested in the Focuser Rose, so we'll click on that, and we get a whole set of information about the product and its features. We've got some photographs of it fitted to different telescopes, as well as some autofocus curves to show how it performs. There we go. Lots of pictures of different setups, all with the Focuser Rose, but I'll let you look at that in your own time. We'll go back up to the top of the page, and if we go to Download Focuser and then scroll down, it's offering you the ASCOM platform, which I already have, so I'm actually on, I think, platform 7. But down here we have the ASCOM driver for the Oasis Focuser. So I'm going to download this and install it. Okay, so having downloaded the ASCOM driver, I've unzipped the file and it creates this folder, which I'll go into, and we've got this setup.exe. I've actually already run this, but running this installs the ASCOM driver. You need to have ASCOM platform installed before you do that, but that's all done. So the next thing is to run up Nina. Now notice that I've only got a USB cable connected to the Focuser Rose, not the 12 volt DC cable. So I was reading up a little bit more, and this is actually the successor to a predecessor product called the Oasis Focuser, not the Oasis Focuser Rose. So there's a distinction. This is, if you like, the update or the version 2 of the previous product, and one of the changes, apart from the fact it's a bit sleeker in physical design, is that this can be powered just from the USB and doesn't require the 12 volts. The reason the 12 volts is still there is that if you need more torque, if you've got a bigger load to turn, or it's tougher to turn because you've got a bigger load on the focus tube, then you can choose to connect the 12 volts DC to get more torque so that it will still work. Okay, so we're into Nina now. I'm going to go to Focuser, and you can see that I've already selected Oasis Focuser as the focuser type. If we click Settings here, we get a dialog appearing, and you can see that it looks very much like what you see in the app on the iPhone. So we've got the in and out amounts of movement for fine and coarse. We've got an absolute go-to. We've got actually got a heater that we can turn on and set a target temperature. There's a thing called stall detection that I've yet to understand exactly what that is, with an option of different amounts of current. I guess if there's something blocking it from turning, the current will rise and there'll be a trip point at which it stops trying. So I think that's probably what stall detection is, but I'm not going to use it at the moment. And you've got the reverse direction, beep on power up, beep on move, and enable Bluetooth. There's also an option here to link the board temp to the ambient temp. If ambient temperature probe is not connected, use board temp. Okay, so you can use the temperature on the PCB inside the Focuser Rose as your temperature if you don't want to use the probe. Okay, so you can always get a temperature. That sounds like a good idea, so I'm going to leave that on. Okay, so I can hit apply and click OK. Now, of course, we could just try a movement here and just make sure that this works. So let's go out by 10,000. That's working, it's turning nicely. And let's go in by 10,000. That's good. And notice when I'm not seeing that strange movement in the wrong direction at the very beginning of a movement in the opposite direction, it's working cleanly, which tells me that that behaviour was something specific to do with the dual speed Crayford focuser on my Newtonian telescope. So that's reassuring. This is working cleanly now. That's great. Okay, so I'm going to hit OK. And I'm going to connect Nina to the focuser, and that's worked. That's great. And now I'm going to try to move to 30,000, for example, and hit move. And it's moving. So that's great. All I need to do now is try this in anger by doing an autofocus when I've got my telescope out among the stars. So I waited for a clear night and I recorded what was happening on the screen. This was my first autofocus run using an HA filter with 5-second exposures. I set the autofocus increment to 2,000 steps. I've sped this up by about 2.5 times just so that you don't have to wait so long to see what happened. And what we're looking for is a nice parabolic curve shape with a clear optimum position and a nice tight fit of the green curve on the points, or the white measurement points on the graph. And so far that's looking really nice, which is what we want to see. But notice all the movement of the focuser is all in a downward direction in terms of position. So that's not actually testing backlash. So this was a second autofocus run. I did this with a blue filter, but it's also sped up just over 2 times. And on this occasion, I got it to start in a different position so that it would have to go back on itself to complete the data set. You'll see what I mean in a little while. So it looks again like a pretty decent set of points with a clear minimum, which is what we want. You'll shortly see that we've got significantly more points to the left of the minimum than we had to the right. So what it actually does is it goes back in the opposite direction to establish an additional point on the right hand side of the curve, and if there was a significant backlash and we weren't compensating it, then that wouldn't work properly, and you can see that it's worked very nicely. So we've got very little backlash. So some final thoughts. The Oasis Focuser Rose is a bit of a surprise to me. I started out having never heard of it. I thought about not even reviewing it because I'd never heard of it and I'd never heard of the company. And then I thought, well, hang on, it might be good, I don't know. So I said yes, and it came, and it's actually significantly better than I was expecting. It solved a problem that I had on my EdgeHD 11, so I can now control the focus electronically or manually just by doing that. Just rotate that, and I'm switching between the two. That's really good. It's so well made. The tolerances, if you like, the machining tolerances in it are so good. I don't need to set any backlash compensation at all. I get really good, clean autofocus curves with it, with no compensation, which is great. And I've decided to permanently leave this on my telescope. The only thing that I think is important to mention is if you're an ASI Air user, of course, you've got problem using this because the ASI Air will only work with ZWO products. Now, I don't see that as a negative of this. I see that as a negative of ASI Air because they are restricting the equipment that people can use. I personally don't like that, which is why I use a mini PC and Nina, so I'm free to use anybody's products that I want to use. But I thought I should mention it because if you're an ASI Air user and you bought one of these, I don't want you to be disappointed that you did that. So overall, I'm very impressed with this product. I don't understand why they haven't sold so many of them. In fact, they've told me that they've recently reduced the price because they haven't been selling as many of them as they would have hoped. So do please check this out. This is a really good product. Until next time, clear skies.